Hi there again, Mark here from Nomad Stays. This week bringing to you my latest update on the future of travel and what's happening around the world. As usual, I'm still in this magnificent area of France, the French Alps. I'm down on the road. My trusty companion Dakar is out there behind me. He is our Chief Happiness Officer. You can see the river out behind me and the decks, and stunningly beautiful day here as it has been all summer. Hope you're enjoying your summer for those in the Northern Hemisphere and winter in the Southern Hemisphere. Some parts of the south are warming up too. I just had a conversation with somebody in Brisbane. Said it's a very warm winter there at the moment. Anyway, so what can I say? Every week is a big week in this travel game with this COVID and isolation and pandemics and flow-ons and so forth. So I've got my trusty iPad here again. I've got a long list of activities and changes. Again, only a week and, well, actually 8 days since my last one. So let me give you an update. So on some good news, there has been the introduction of a new safe travel stamp insignia by the World Travel and Tourism Corporation, Cooperative. This is where the WTTC have looked at countries. Countries have met a standard of safety in travel and are allowing people to visit without having to isolate. It gives you a level of certainty that the country is doing very well. Basically, it's all wrapped around a test, a COVID test, and if you have one in the last 72 hours and it's negative, then you don't need to isolate in the first countries. Now, those first countries are Croatia, Ecuador, and Ghana. First three listed off the bat. Although we've been seeing that this new standard of testing and avoiding isolation has started coming in a couple of other countries. Italy has started using it. For instance, while Croatia is on the safe list, if you go from Croatia back into Italy, you'll be isolated right now unless you've had this test. If you're coming from Spain and that really good area that didn't have much COVID for a while, that's the Balearic Islands. If you're coming out of the Balearic Islands, it's Majorca and so forth, back to Germany, if you don't have a test, as of a few days ago, it looks like you're going to be 14 days in isolation again. So the testing regime is going to be here for a while. And after the testing regime, it's going to be vaccines. We've already seen moves in Australia where the Australian government's probably going to make coronavirus vaccine mandatory, both for, potentially for all the citizens and also visitors. Time will tell. While we're in Australia, the major airline Qantas has decided that probably international flying will not begin until at least July 2021. So, they're expecting a prolonged lockdown, isolation from the rest of the world. And those in Australia will know full well that there are many borders shut between the states and each other. The internationals for a while have been hit with a 14-day isolation in the hotel, not of your choice, for the nice price of about $2,000, 2,000 euros. Well, that now is applying to people crossing the borders. Even internally. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of this spreading a little bit further around the world. Although, here in Europe, there seems to be a much more acceptance of the situation. Testing is going on, and there's I guess, more support, more trying to help people overcome this disease rather than to lock them away somewhere. Differences around the world, we're going to see more, and it's very much related to the politics. France, as I talked about last week, has had a bit of an uptick, although it's sort of dropped down a little bit. When I say uptick, they reached about 3,000 new cases a day in the last week, but now dropping down to about 1,000 new cases a day. So for 60-odd million people, still pretty low. The good news is the testing is still going well, and even better is that just over 2% of those tested are being found with COVID. So the spreading is still very, very small, and it's very isolated in certain areas, or départements, as they're called here. Small states. This state of Savoie, where I'm in, about 450,000 people. It's one of about 100 prefectures, départements in France. And if I turn around and have a look at the other side of the border, that's Arn. That the other side of the river there, it's a different part of France. It's a different department. In fact, where I am has only been part of France for about 160 years. For most of the last 1,000 years, it was the Kingdom of Sardinia. So that river, that Rhone River, was the border, and it's the reason we find so many castles on either side of the border, just in case those Sardinians wanted to invade France or France wanted to invade Sardinia. So that departmental legislation, that notification is fine. There are certain, I think there's 4 or 5 departments in France out of 100 which are now moved back into the red list. Probably the most notable one of change recently is Toulouse. That area down around the city of Toulouse, home to Airbus for the aviation geeks out there. And Toulouse has now made it mandatory wearing your masks outdoors as well as indoors. So while you're in the city, you're just wearing that mask the whole time. Masks are the new norm. If you haven't worked it out, and it's time to realise that we're in this game for another couple of years. Okay, let's have a look at some of this. Uptick in the Bilderic Islands, as I mentioned. So normally not a problem, but you may remember last month that the Balearic Islands, part of Spain, was largely coronavirus free. They opened up 2 weeks earlier than Spain did. They flew in charter flights full of German tourists. I think they did about 12,000, maybe 15,000 visitors in for the ideal summer occasion. And anyway, there's been an uptick now. So there's something like 30,000 German tourists alone sitting in the islands that are likely to be isolated when they come home if they don't get tested. So be ready. There's multiple testing coming to places near you. Montenegro, one of our favourite little areas, it's been opening up its borders. So they've opened up to Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and many of the Western European countries. So that's really good. You may remember that Montenegro is a relatively small place with some great summer tourism, beautiful rivers on the Adriatic and feeding into the Adriatic, forests and beaches and all of this. Well, we saw, when they got locked off last month, we saw prices for a room for a month drop from, say, 1,500 euros back down to about 300 euros. Now that the border's open with Serbia, we're going to expect those prices to go up. So if you were lucky enough to be able to pick up a great price room, the people following you may not be so lucky. What we also know from our members and friends in Serbia is that Serbs were stuck at home, and Serbs normally leave the country. So there was this massive demand for Serbian-based accommodation during the northern summer, and it sent prices sky high because suddenly everybody was in the country, there wasn't that much supply, and they happened to pay a lot more. Now that at least neighbouring Montenegro is open for them, we expect that sort of to even out, which should help both countries to some extent. All right, what else have we been happening? All right, good news is properties around the world, hotels, stays, hostels, continuing to opening up. 1st of September looks like a bit of a key date for a number of properties we've been tracking. There in the US, they're looking about 56% of properties that are now reopened. So more than half have reopened, even in the US. And from what we're seeing around Europe, it's probably even a higher percentage. They've kept open. There were government subsidies to keep it open, and it's sort of lessened the economic impact quite some time. All right, vaccines. Yep, vaccines are still being worked on. I mentioned before about the Australian government probably going to make it mandatory. Wouldn't be surprised for a number of other countries to do that as these vaccines get through their final parts of testing. So vaccines and tests, that might be the new way. What else we got? Oh, again, everything changes very quickly. So we are facing still this continued window of opportunity. So you've got to grab these windows while you can. Now that might mean taking a risk that you might travel to a country that might be presently closed, but you're expecting them to open up. Anybody that went into Montenegro in the last couple of weeks would have certainly experienced that. Similarly, you might want to get into and out of a country fast if you think they're going to go on to the red zone. Again, friends did that from England. They came into France when it was open, and now, as of sort of 10 days ago, when they're returning to England, they must be self-quarantining from all of France, not even those 4 or 5 departments that we were talking about. So these windows of opportunities is the key to travel right now. You've got to grab them because they're going to close quickly. There's a lot more standardisation on the calculation method, the numbers, the stats are being used by governments as their core data input for changing their policies on a country-by-country basis. If the numbers go up, then you would expect countries will start red listing some of their neighbours and vice versa. As a friend recently said, France doesn't report COVID numbers on the weekend, so if I think I'll get out on Monday knowing that the British government won't make this change before Monday night at the earliest. And they were right. They beat it by about 5 days, as it turned out. So what do? You've got to sort of swat up on some of these things. You've got to make a judgment as to whether the numbers are right, who's listening to the numbers, where are these opportunities, and then look further afield. There was a great report out from an Aussie this week who was in Bali. He's been in Bali for some time. He got a visa extension due to COVID. Anyway, the visa extension ran out and they're not reissuing there in Indonesia right now. So he was having to look at leaving the country, and that meant back to Australia, €2,000, $2,000, 14 days quarantine in a hotel, not of your choice. And he said, no, you know what, I'm going to book myself a flight to Belarus. Could have stayed in Indonesia, but 94 Aussie, which is that's about $65 a day penalty. He said, it's going to get a bit expensive. So we flew into Belarus. Now Belarus is sort of going through some fairly major political demonstrations and problems at the moment. The Prime Minister, President has been there a long time. There's questions about whether the recent election was fair. He apparently won 80-odd% of the vote. And so the riots have been kicking off, and that's getting a little bit dangerous. We've seen the same happen in Serbia and in Bulgaria over the last couple of months, and now we've seen the government basically fall in Mali in West Africa. Now Mali's a wonderful place. It's I've had the pleasure of travelling it from north of Timbuktu all the way down many areas of Mali. I really like Mali, although the military insurgency at the moment is just too bad. The government has just fallen. Things are not going to be really good there for a while. Last week there was a major killing only an hour. Actually, that was in nearby Niger, which is one of the safer countries. Niger had a killing only an hour from the capital. 6 French tourists visiting a nature park, which is one of the last locations of a particular form of giraffe. They were killed by unknown combatants. So the Islamist influence, jihadism, that's getting a bit rough and ready in some of these places. But again, you're going to have to make a choice as to where the safest areas are and where are the ones with the safe is in many aspects. So safe in terms of health and safety and economic safety as well. Turkey, you can go and visit Turkey, but they're racked with COVID right now. Their economy's crashing. The Turkish lira is dying. It's going to put a lot of pressure, and it doesn't take much to work out that some of the citizens are probably going to, react a little bit for their dire situation. So, I don't think there's any particularly more places in the world affected now than any time in the last 100 years. It's just we probably know about it a lot more. And that gives us ammunition to be able to make a better judgment. So being able to look at numbers, make a judgment, reach a position on your travel is very much part of the new game. And people are travelling, believe me. I just mentioned 30,000 Germans sitting down there on Mallorca. there's quite a lot of travel. The airline industry is happening. The roads are starting to clog up again on busy weekends. Certainly here in Europe, we're expecting Europe's pretty much the centre of tourism for most of the next 12 months at least. And there will be weekly changes, if not daily changes, about borders and things crossing borders and what happens in this isolation. Alrighty, that's pretty much my summary for the week. Be safe. Take advantage of the specials and the discounts and things that are out there. You'll find a heap on Nomad Stay's website. And prepare yourself to take calculated risks. Have fun, enjoy exploring the world, and we'll see you soon. Cheers for now.